This is Groove Talk with Froggy Style.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Groove Talk. On this episode, I am joined by Sami Parker, and they are the host of the local singles show that plays on CJSW here in Calgary every Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. Thank you, Sami, for being on the show. I guess we should just caveat this with this is our second time doing this intro, so
woohoo!
Yay for computer problems.
All right.
Yeah. So I guess just to start this off, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell the folks who are listening a little bit about the local singles show.
All right. Well, Cody and I have gotten to know each other pretty well. Second time through. My name is Sami Parker. I'm the host of Local Singles on CJSW 90.9 FM. I'm also a non-binary musician in town, and I play in the band God Spilt the Milk as a drummer.
Yes. So I guess just maybe a little background information. How did you get involved with CJSW?
Yeah, so when I got involved with CJSW, it was actually my first year of university, and the week that I ended up going up to the station was the week that I was doing orientation. So when I was with my orientation group heading into the gym for the commencement speech, I decided to start walking backwards to try to avoid the gaze of my O group leader, and eventually I just ditched the whole ceremony for the opening ceremony, because, I mean, who wants to listen to somebody talk for hours, right? But
I hope a lot of people, this is a podcast.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, I know a lot of people listen to this podcast. But I went up to CJSW afterwards, and it was a really good experience. I made friends with the station manager, Adam Camus, and it was actually his first week there, so we have that in common with the fact that we've been at CJSW around the same amount of time. Now, I should mention that he has been a volunteer for much, much longer. It was just him starting out as the station manager, which he is currently today. And I also met some other staff members, and they're super excited that I came up and said hello. I think I was the first new volunteer of that year, and they found it really funny that I decided to ditch orientation just to come up to CJSW and check things out.
Awesome. I know that you said before that you have been involved with the station for about 5 years now. Is that?
Yeah, 5 years in September, I believe.
Okay, awesome. So I guess over that time, what has kept you there? What has kept you coming back?
A lot of the people, honestly. I was always kind of like an outsider or a loner. Not really like, the stereotypical loner type. But I didn't have like a whole lot of friends who shared my passion for music or weird and nerdy things. So when I got to CJSW, I met a whole ton of people who were crazy talented musicians, but also very interested in a lot of the same things I'm interested in, namely music, which is really cool. All the people there are very unique. You have a big blend of people from all walks of life, and all of them are so kind and so nice. So that's kind of what kept me there and hanging around.
Awesome. That is something that I've also kind of experienced with the local music scene, was just like the kindness and the acceptance and like the open arms that you get greeted by just everybody involved, right? Everybody is so nice, and you, like you said, you have people from all walks of life. It's every single type of person you could imagine, and they're all brought together just because of their love of music.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really great crowd to be in with as well, because it gets you a lot of opportunities to go and learn about shows that you may not have heard about, or learn about bands that you haven't heard about, or even meet a lot of musicians in the local music scene. CJSW has an enormous amount of musicians hanging out there, as well as different people who are involved in different music festivals as well. So it's really cool kind of being able to build up those connections.
Yeah, and I can only imagine just the people that hang around there. I've gone to the volunteer orientation for CJSW, and I've definitely toyed around with the idea of volunteering. Unfortunately, I do have a day job that I have to work that, to pay the bills and stuff, and that is from 9 to 5, so it's kind of hard to find the time sometimes.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky. I mean, especially now with the pandemic, but even before then, it can be tricky to find time. I get you. I work almost 40 hours a week as well, and still try to make time in to go in for my show, but also to, help out in other areas where I can.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think I signed up for my very first volunteer shift, but that was March of 2020.
Oh, no.
And it was like it was one of the events that was happening, and I was just like working the booth or whatever. And that event ended up getting canceled because of the pandemic. So,
so many events in March ended up getting canceled. Man.
Yeah. So that was my attempt to volunteer at CJSW, and yeah.
That's okay. You can always go back once everything kind of calms down.
Yeah, no, I would definitely like to. It's I like what they do at CJSW. I like the community focus of the radio station, and I like the community focus of your show in particular. I think that is kind of that's what I like about radio nowadays, is that it keeps you kind of connected with what's happening in your community.
Yeah, it's really cool, and CJSW is really, really great at doing that as well. CJSW is also like a campus/community radio station. There are radio stations that are purely campus-based, such as MRU and SATE, but then you have other radio stations like CJSW and CKUA as well that are more community-based, so they kind of serve a wider base of people rather than just the students that are going to whichever schools the radio stations happen to be located at, which is a really cool initiative because CJSW works with a whole bunch of different people. We have a friends card where we work with local businesses to kind of do a little bit of a deal there, and sponsor different events as well. So CJSW is all over that community stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess for those who haven't tuned into your show before, could you give us a little bit of information on that?
Yeah, for sure. So if you are tuning into Local Singles for the very first time, you can expect to hear a whole mix of genres from local musicians all over Calgary, in and outside of the Calgary area. And when I'm saying outside, I'm saying like Okotoks, Cochrane, about those half an hour drives. Even if it's High River, I'll consider Olds, that kind of thing. And it's a mixed genres, so I'll play anything from punk to funk, I'll play metal, I'll play jazz. Basically, it kind of depends on how I'm feeling for the day or what kind of music I've stumbled across that week, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of great local music that you can tune into, you can listen, and if you like it, I always like to encourage people to go and support that artist's social media, because it's the cheapest, aka free way to just support artists and help them, boost their engagement online. But I also play artists from so many different decades as well. I've played bands from the 80s, the 90s, bands that have been around since then and are still together now. But I've also played bands that formed within the last 2 years or so. So really, it's just it's a whole mix of fun local music.
Awesome. And I guess, how do you go about finding the bands and the artists that you do play on your show?
So this is it's a big compilation of resources. So one of the first things I like to do is check out the CJSW chart list. So every week our music director takes in brand new submissions that they may have received online or, anyway, from musicians that are, just sending music into CJSW. So they go through all that music and then they'll throw it up on our chart list, which is like a little resource for us to use, but it also kind of correlates with the earshot kind of chart list that you would see for radio stations online. And that's a really good resource to find kind of newer music or music that maybe I haven't stumbled across before. Maybe that's not even in our CJSW library. So that's one resource I like to use through CJSW. And of course, we have a music library that is, honestly, I think it's one of the largest music libraries in Canada in regards to the other campus and community radio stations. So there's a whole ton of great stuff to look through there. But I use Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music a lot as well to kind of search for those types of artists, and social media. I find that social media is a really important resource because a lot of people will be getting out there, they'll be hustling to promote their band, and I get a lot of submissions through that too. I have an Instagram account where I encourage local musicians to hit me up, send me your music, send me a message if you want my email, and you can send me your music that way. So there's so many different ways I use to find music. But probably the biggest help for me is a list that I compiled for my own kind of sake of a whole bunch of different bands. It's actually on Spotify. It's a public playlist called Local Singles CJSW, I think, or YYC. I can't really remember the name 100%, to be honest, but it has something like 20 hours of music on there, and that's just what I've compiled from doing radio over the past 2 years. So if I get really, really stuck, I'll go and I'll look through that Spotify playlist, and I'll click on artists and see if they have new tracks out, something like that.
I feel like it's kind of like an important question to ask, because I'm sure there's people out there, especially in today's age with the amount of music that is on the internet, it can be hard to filter through it all or find the stuff that you really like. It's an endless supply of music.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, what do they call it? A bittersweet thing. Double-edged sword. Yeah, it's you can find so many great resources on the internet, but sometimes it could be really challenging to find new music, which is why I like to use Bandcamp sometimes, because they'll have, location-based tags that you can put down. You can kind of look at the dates and whatnot, but it can be a challenge when you're using the internet to find music.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a good a good tip too, is the Bandcamp and the tags that you can use on Bandcamp. You can find some really good, interesting, cool music by just searching through those tags. Yeah,
and you can even add your own custom tags, which I find is pretty important if I want to find certain types of music. If I found, a few songs and I want to fill out a set in my show with something that sounds kind of similar, I can just type in the genres that they have, and they have so many different genres on Bandcamp as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, another way if you want to find cool music is obviously to listen to shows like yours.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. And honestly, supporting community radio stations, you're going to find a lot of really cool underground music, because it's a whole bunch of people that have niche interests in music. So, we'll have shows that are completely dedicated to metal, or we'll have shows completely dedicated to folk or jazz. So it's pretty cool that you can find this underground type of music just by listening to a radio station.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And CJSW is particularly great for that because of the diverse range of shows that it like presents to the public, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Not to mention our staff members. They all have a very unique and almost eclectic kind of music taste as well. I can tell you that our music director, she has so many interesting music tastes, and it's really cool to see what she puts up on our chart lists. Lots of new music that I would love to play on my show, but unfortunately it's not local. So who knows? Maybe one day I'll have a chance to play that on a different show.
Yeah. And that is the thing too, right? Because like everybody, I feel like thinks that they in particular have great taste in music, and I'm sure, yeah, exactly. So I mean, but I'm sure, like, you know, I think I have great taste in music. I'm sure you think you have great taste in music, and everybody I've met thinks that they have great taste in music. So it's cool that you get to see the individual tastes on CJSW, and like you get to see like the cream of the crop or just what people are digging in so many diverse genres. Yeah,
it's almost like a little bit of a personal touch to your radio, because commercial radio stations, they're just not the same. I mean, they operate a lot differently. There's a lot of different requirements, and I would say like advertising kind of requirements as well. But with community radio, I really feel like you get that personal touch of somebody talking about their favorite band or talking about their favorite track, something like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's the people who present the music to you, the hosts of the shows, they talk about the music with a little bit more passion because, you know, it isn't the same thing that everybody else is playing, right? It's different. They are actually passionate about the music that they play on their show.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, I mean, you touched on the genres of music that you play on your show a little bit, but I guess what is it that what kind of genres do you personally listen to?
That's a hard question, because I like a whole bunch of different type of music. I grew up listening to a bunch of different types of music. I can say that I'm not a big fan of country, unless it's, you know, the older stuff or more of a kind of like alt folk kind of country. So basically, I don't want to hear the mainstream kind of stuff you'd hear on a commercial radio station for country. But my go-tos have always kind of changed depending on the year. I'd say right now I'm really into a lot of funk type music, kind of like fusions as well. Anything that's really heavily inspired by funk or jazz or has an interesting kind of chord progression, I get really into. I'm just not a big fan of like generic country, or for me personally, like any kind of screamo, I guess. Like very, very talented that you're able to create that kind of sound with your throat, but for me it just kind of makes my ears go, no, thank you. That just may be because I am neurodiverse and I have certain like sensory inputs that I'm like, no, thank you, I don't want that. Yeah, but even if I don't necessarily listen to a lot of a genre like metal, for example, I don't actually listen to a lot of metal, I still appreciate it so much because, and I always like to say this, the skill that it takes to be a guitar player in the metal genre, even a drummer, it's like, oh my gosh, props to you musicians, because I could never.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I think your answer right there proves that you have good taste in music, because like, even though you don't listen to a genre, you can appreciate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's a big part about music too. Even if it's just not your thing, it's not what you're into, if you're still able to appreciate the skill and the talents and the work that went into it, then yeah, I'd say you have pretty decent music taste.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the same way with metal. Like, I used to be a huge metalhead. I used to love metal back in like high school and stuff like that. But I'm just not as angry anymore, so I can't relate to it as much, you know?
Yeah, when I was younger, I listened to a lot more emo music, I guess, or music that would be kind of construed as emo or dark, but I don't listen to that anymore. Sometimes I'll throw it on if I want a bit of nostalgia, listen to Billy Talent or something. But it's nowadays I'm just all about that funk, those the big horns, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I'm the same way. Like, I'll still, every once in a while, I get in the mood and I'll listen to some metal. But it's just like, I listen to it differently because now I more listen for, like, the instrumental bits of metal that, like, that's really kind of what, like, captures my attention. But I agree with you 100%. I'm way more into, like, funk right now and, like, jazz and stuff that seems to, like, have soul, for lack of a better term.
Oh, I love soul music. Yeah, things that have like soul and just a certain kind of feeling to it that almost draws you in immediately.
Yeah, and it's so different from like metal music, whereas like metal music it's technical, it's fast, it's like played extremely well. Whereas, like, when you find music that has, like, soul or, like, you know, like, really good funkiness to it, it's, like, simpler, but it doesn't lose that impact at all. And it's, like, technical in different ways and, like, slower ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I used to be in a jazz band so when I was in high school, so I totally understand what you're getting at. Yeah, it's really interesting to see the variations of technical skill between genres as well. And especially when you listen to music as a musician, you know, you're listening for these things. You're listening for interesting time signatures, or you're listening for the tonality and the actual musicality. And I feel like it brings the appreciation of music to a whole new level.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's another thing is I think that musicians, and you kind of touched on it there, I think musicians listen to music in a different way than like people who don't play music.
Yeah, for sure. Just like I'm sure painters will look at a painting the different way than people who maybe don't use that medium.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess it could probably be said for anything that anybody is passionate about.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I guess how did you get involved with the local music scene?
So I kind of touched on it earlier, but I've had a lot of different musical influences throughout my life. And I started drumming as a marching band snare drummer when I was about 12 years old. I was actually in the cadet program where I would do, honor band. Yes, I went to band camp. A whole bunch of just nerdy things like that. I was in a jazz band. I was in my high school concert bands. And then eventually I graduated, so I didn't really have a resource anymore to go and play music. And that's something that's super important to me. I've always loved playing music. I used to play the saxophone. I can play a little bit of guitar, but drumming's my main instrument. So when, I graduated, I still wanted to find and keep that connection to music. Before I even joined God Spilt the Milk as their drummer, it was my dream to be on stage performing live in a band. So I guess I kind of manifested that in a way. I met some really cool musicians through complete happenstance, and they ended up taking me to one of my first local music shows. And from there, I just really fell in love with the crowd and the energy. And just live music is so much different than listening to an album at home on your own or through headphones. Live music it can blow you away, and it can make you have all these feelings and feel like you're connected to emotion. I know that when I hear like a really, really uplifting song when I'm out listening to a live band, sometimes I want to cry. And that's honestly the emotion that I live for, is just feeling that connection through music and that emotional connection as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% there. One of my favorite feelings is hearing something live that just completely like blows my mind, for lack of a better term.
Oh my gosh.
Something happens on stage and I'm left in the crowd with like basically my jaw on the floor, just staring off and being like looking around at everybody and being like, are you hearing this? Like, but are you hearing this?
It's like we're all hearing the same thing. But are you hearing this?
Yeah.
I find myself, especially as a musician, I love watching the musicians play, especially drummers. And when I see drummers that just have an insane handle on their kit, they're doing all these different things, making really cool beats. I just love watching them play because you can see the joy on their faces and you can see, that feeling when you get kind of tuned into your own music and it's almost like you're drifting away, but, clearly you're still present because you're playing the music. You can see that on people's faces and you can see how much they're enjoying it and how much they're, getting into the energy of the crowd. And that's honestly probably one of my favorite parts is just watching the bands have so much fun on stage because that will make a huge difference for the show.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, the crowd feeds off the energy of the band and then the band feeds off the energy of the crowd and it's just a feedback loop.
Yeah, a very positive one.
Yeah. And some of my favorite moments at live shows too are, when a band kind of goes like off script, they just have that little like jam session or impromptu kind of like guitar solo or whatever it is. Those are some of my favorite moments in live music that you just can't get with like recorded music.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had one of those moments too in God Spilt the Milk. So a few of God Spilt the Milk members are also in the Torchettes, and we were doing a set just before things shut down again, I believe, last summer. And it was one of those sets where we got all the stuff, we got through our music, and the crowd was like, let's play another song. And we're like, oh no, we don't have another song. So the three people that were in the Torchettes turned to me and then the bass player and we're like, okay, so here's the chord progression. This is kind of how it goes. We're just going to play the song. We're just going to do it. And then we started playing the song and it was so fun. It was so good. And it was probably the highlight of my summer last year was just learning the song 30 seconds before we actually played it. And there's a lot of bands out there who have similar stories where they'll just go into some sort of live jam before an audience and it just turns out so fantastic because the energies of both groups are just lining up so well. So yeah, definitely live music and those live moments, very, very cool.
Yeah. No, some of my favorite for sure, both being like a part of them and experiencing them.
Yeah, it's definitely different when you're experiencing it as well as a band member than experiencing it as an audience member. Still the same kind of feeling of, oh my gosh, this is amazing, but kind of different in a way.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And it's kind of like that like intangible thing and it's hard to explain, but there isn't a feeling there for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, how exactly can you explain the heart and soul of music? As cheesy as that sounds, it is so hard to put into words exactly all the feels, but I'm sure people listening today and people who have gone to local music shows can highly relate.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think that being a musician yourself and playing in bands, has that given you, like, do you think a unique perspective on the way that you kind of select music for your show?
I would say in a way, just because I've been doing music for so long and I've gone through formal education. Like, I didn't start playing in a rock band or on the drum kit until like 2 years ago or something. So all my music knowledge before then is very technical, very theory-based, very kind of like concert band orchestra-based. But I find that when I'm listening to music, I can really hear like the different things and going on, whether that's the musicality or the tonality, and I can hear kind of what the quality sounds like as well. And that kind of goes into a little bit of what I show plan. So I don't want to, write anybody off because their music isn't necessarily, their track isn't up to the quality that I personally would like it, as in, maybe a WAV file format or the quality of sound coming through the speakers. But that's also the nice thing about having a show on a community radio station is that you can kind of get away with playing some lower, like quote unquote, lower quality songs on air as well. But when I'm looking at the actual music, I'm really just listening for, is it good enough for a radio broadcast? As in, is the sound quality good? So I try not to judge music too much based on my personal tastes because I know what I like and what people play may be very different. But I do definitely want to have a decent sound quality just for radio play so people aren't, listening to a crappy homemade demo that was done on somebody's iPhone. Like that, maybe I won't take. But if it's something that's actually somewhat polished, for sure, yeah.
Awesome. And I guess that's kind of the thing about it today too is with technology that we have, it's a lot easier to kind of get that polished product now.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you don't necessarily put in a whole lot of effort into a track or a song, you can still get a pretty decent sound quality out of it, which is really nice when I'm trying to look for tracks to play on air.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think we touched on it earlier, but it's exciting because there is so much music out there, and because anybody can really do it nowadays, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. If you're a musician and you want to record music, you could definitely do it.
Yes, yeah, it's very, very possible.
Yeah. It's not, the quality, it definitely isn't always there, but if you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah, the resources are there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd just be interested. I know, again, we kind of touched on it in the lost recording there, but I'd be very interested in just kind of what local bands are you listening to right now?
Yeah, for sure. I like that. The lost recording. I guess they'll never know what we said to each other. So I have quite a few favorite bands. It's really hard to kind of pick one, but I will go with some that I've thought of off the top of my head. So this one might be a little bit biased because I do have friends in the band, but this band is called Handmade, and they're a very interesting band. They fall more into the indie genre, but since they've started, they've been adding in more elements. So whether that's like jazz-based or a funk-based kind of element, it's been getting really interesting as their discography kind of moves along and they keep creating new music. Their first album was very indie pop, I would have to say, but their most recent release, which is on YouTube now, it was a live kind of session done. They don't have it on streaming services, but it's on YouTube, and it's called Sticky Tongues. And it's really, I love that song. It's really fun to listen to, and they've been utilizing a saxophone player as well, who is insanely talented for his age. He's 21 or 22, I don't know the exact age, but he plays like he's been playing for 40 years or something. So there's that. Handmade, very, very good band who is slowly redefining their sound and gaining speed, I guess, within the local music scene. And then for a different genre, I'm going to have to go with Figaro. It kind of has similar band members in it, but they use a lot of jazz and funk elements. They have a saxophone player, I think his name is Graham Fox, also a very, very, very good saxophone player. And they write a lot of interesting songs, and they're more so of a newer band. I believe they have a demo out on Bandcamp, but I'm not sure as far as recording goes, where they have their... And then finally, I always like to say this band, Copperhead. They are a really great band in Calgary. They're a little bit older, have been around for a little bit longer, and off of their most recent album, my favorite song is More by Copperhead. And it's because it uses violins, it uses horns in it. I know that they have a Barry saxophone player. And honestly, I just love any band that uses horns. If you got a trumpet going, you got a saxophone going, I love it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I can't get enough of a good horn section in a band, especially in a local band.
Oh, yeah, and there's quite a few bands out there that use it. I know, like, for example, Self-Plug, God Spilt the Milk, like, we've been working with saxophone players. There's other bands like Lomlet, whose main, like, their front person is an incredible saxophone player who's worked with other musicians as well. And then you have I'm the Mountain that has trombone and trumpet in it. And then there is a band out there. They don't have any real horns. I believe they were playing with Rubino, but the man can do an amazing mouth trumpet. It sounds almost exactly like a trumpet, but it's all his mouth that's doing the noises.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah, just had to slide that one in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome you mentioned I Am the Mountain too. They're probably one of my favorite local bands. The horn section is just so cool, and they all just like vibe so well together. I've probably seen them like half a dozen times at least. Like Lomlet's also awesome. And I just want to throw in Long Time No Time for another great horn section.
Yes, yeah. And the cool thing about Long Time No Time too is that they started as kind of like a UFC band, and I've listened to a whole bunch of their tracks, and they have a lot of different range. Like they have one song that's like Tombone or something like that, where it's like really heavy and kind of dark, and then they have other songs that are lighter and more kind of jazzy based. I really like Long Time No Time.
I agree with you for sure. It's one of my favorite things that they do in particular is they take like jazz and they'll be playing straight up jazz and then they just drop hip hop verses over top of it. And it's just like, this is so cool right now.
Yeah, there's a hip hop artist, Jazz Lib. They do something pretty similar. They have like a lot of jazzy tracks, but then they'll be rapping over it, which is also like the hip hop community in Calgary is insane as well. I do have to say, I love Sergeant X Comrade. They're within the hip-hop community, but Yolanda Sargent's also a very good soul singer as well. I listen to a lot of their music on my own time as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's I was never really into hip-hop music too much before I started like listening to local hip-hop. And like local hip-hop is kind of what expanded my horizons, I guess, within like the hip hop genre and made me appreciate all this other hip hop music that I started coming across, like that wasn't necessarily local.
Honestly, I'd have to say the same. Like before I started my show, Local Singles, I didn't know a whole lot about hip hop and rap. Like I listened to a few artists like Anderson .Paak and A Tribe Called Quest and those kinds of artists, Mac Miller, but when I started getting to like the Calgary hip hop scene, oh my goodness, like opened up my eyes completely to the genre, which I think is really, really cool about the local music scene as well, is that, you know, you'll have artists within these different genres that will make you want to listen to the genre even more, even if they're not local.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And it's cool the crossover that you get within it too. You know, you can have a funk band and they will meet somebody who's a really good hip-hop artist, and then they'll collaborate on something, and then you'll get this funky hip-hop track that is like birthed from within that collaboration.
Funky hip-hop tracks are like my life anthem. I love them so much.
Yeah, no, me too. I feel like there's some sort of like funk revival that's taking place right now. A lot of bands seem to be leaning really heavy on like the funk and soul influence right now, and I really, really like that.
Yeah, and I would say even before like a lot of the funk and the soul and the jazz vibes started coming through, I heard a lot of disco influence as well happening. So it's really cool that we're bringing back, these older type genres in a new way.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I guess it's kind of the same, you see it in fashion, you see it in like trends and pop culture and whatever. It just kind of all circulates,
Yeah, and I mean, it's the 20s. Why not bring back swing music and swing dancing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So I guess if somebody wanted to get involved with CJSW and I guess kind of do what you do, what are some steps that they would have to go through to do that?
Yeah, well, first things first, head on over to CJSW. Get involved by volunteering. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Currently, it's a little hard to do because of the pandemic, but we and our COVID protocols are pretty, safe and strict at CJSW. However, there are some opportunities that people can take part in now. So first things first, I would say if you can't visit CJSW in person, definitely head over to the website, and we have contact information for our volunteer coordinator, Molly, who is fantastic. I'm going to say that about every staff member, though. I love the staff at CJSW. But that's probably one of the easiest ways to kind of get started is to talk to a volunteer coordinator. And if you want to do what I'm doing with CJSW, meaning hosting a show, being a show announcer, it does take some extra training. So typically the rule of thumb is it takes about a year as a volunteer before you start to get show trained and have the opportunity to start doing shows online. And that training typically consists of production training, so it's getting you used to what a soundboard looks like, sound quality and editing, because sometimes when we do, for example, we can do, oh no, I forgot the word for it, but pre-records, yes, there we go. We can pre-record our show and put it up to our production coordinator, and we can air it that way. So having some production skills is pretty important, but you don't always necessarily have to go through that step. And then once you are production trained, or if you really want to skip that, you'll typically move on to on-air training. And that's about a month-long process where the first 2 weeks you're kind of shadowing, you're learning about what's going on in the booth, you're learning about the timings in between sets, between music, and kind of the things that we typically like to say on air. For example, you're listening to CJSW 90.9 FM. Things like that, which we like to call CRTC stamps. If we have a sponsor, we have to, kind of learn when to say, hey, this is our show sponsor, go check them out. So there's a lot of different multitasking steps that go into learning about radio. And then the last 2 weeks, when you're doing your on-air training, you're actually getting some time on air and you're actually planning out parts of the show. And the people who do the training are typically seasoned programmers, so they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time, and they're good at teaching other volunteers as well. So it is a bit of a process, and once you are show trained, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a show right away. You'll have to put through, a show proposal and go through that kind of process. But once you've done that, honestly, it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. You can start filling in for other shows if you don't have a proposal of your own yet, and yeah, it's not bad at all. And if you're a student, you do have to buy a membership in order to use the equipment, because it is really expensive equipment, and it's a good way of insurance, but it's not that expensive. If you're a U of C student, it's like $5. If you're a non-U of C student, it's $10. And if you're like me, a community member, it's $15 for the whole year. So it's really a good deal to be able to get access to all that equipment.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm kind of curious. Why do you think that radio what makes radio special over other medias, would you say?
That's an interesting question, because there's so many different kinds of medias out there. But for me, I would say radio, it creates a lot of personal connections. You might feel personal connections to the people on your television screen, but I don't know about, you or any of the listeners, but me personally, if I'm watching like a show or something, I might feel somewhat connected to some of the characters based on how they're written, but with radio, most of it's live. Most of it is well thought out, and people have generally a plan of what they're going to do when they're on air. And, they'll have scripts or they'll have talking points to talk about. So it feels a lot more personal in that sense, especially community radio stations, because they have the chance to play a lot of underground music. They have a little bit more freedom to talk about, local businesses or businesses that they want to support, or different kinds of themes for their show. Whereas commercial radio stations, again, I'm not 100% sure how they work, but it almost seems like there's a bit of a formula to them. They have to do their ads, they have to talk about certain things, or they could talk about certain things. But part of it feels so professional that it's almost impersonal with commercial radio. At least that's my opinion. There are stations out there that do a really good job of connecting with their audiences. But radio is it's really personal, and it feels good to be able to tune in to somebody who is talking likely most of the time live, and you get to hear what they're saying right then and there, instead of watching a YouTube video of somebody who's done a video like 10 years ago or something.
I agree with that. I feel like, especially with radio stations like CJSW, and yes, like you mentioned, there are some more professional radio stations that do it better than others, for sure. Just off X92.9, I feel like maybe does it better than some of the other ones. They at least have like the local music aspect to it on the Sundays and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That was another radio station on my mind, and exactly the same thing. Matt Berry, I'm not exactly sure of his exact position at X92.9 right now, but he does exposure at Sundays at 9 p.m., I think, and that's awesome. I love it when radio stations, especially commercial radio stations that are large like they are, do something like that. And that's a really good personal touch. But for example, I never listen to any of the country radio stations. Maybe that's just because I don't like country, but it's also because I feel, it's not as personal as listening to maybe an alternative kind of station that will play more niche music.
Yeah. And that's what I really like about CJSW is I feel like it kind of gives you, it kind of puts your fingers on the pulse of what's happening in your city and in your community. And that's what I really appreciate about CJSW in particular.
Yeah, and that's kind of what drew me in too. I know CJSW does a whole lot of work with different music festivals. They work with Calgary Underground Film Fest. They do a whole bunch of stuff for the community, in the community, around the community. And that's, it's really important to be able to support, local businesses and local artists, especially during a pandemic or hard times like we have been going through.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the best feelings about going through a pandemic like this is actually seeing communities come together, I feel.
Oh, yeah. The amount of community initiatives that I've seen put on by local musicians or photographers or artists, it is very heartwarming. I love seeing it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Has there been any challenges with doing your show through the pandemic, or?
No, I've been very fortunate to be a part of, CJSW is actually one of the only radio stations in Canada that have, campus community radio stations that has continued to do 24/7 programming. So I haven't found any challenges because I only really go in once a week to do my show anyway, and if I am volunteering. I'm doing my volunteer work from home because typically I can easily do it from home. So I haven't had a lot of personal challenges myself, and I don't believe that there has been a lot of programmers that have had challenges unless they've gotten sick or anything. And I've been really lucky. I haven't gotten sick at all. And the COVID protocols at the station are really, really good as well. They have a minimum amount or like a maximum amount of people. Each programmer, like after my show, I always wipe down the entire studio, and that's just kind of a mutual respect that the programmers have for each other in the station to be able to continue doing the programming during the pandemic, but also following all the protocols. So it's been really interesting to see how CJSW has kind of been thriving through all of this.
Awesome. On a more, I guess, have you found it harder to find local music to play that is new through the pandemic?
Yes and no. So there has been like a lot of local bands that have had to delay their album releases or even just the recording of their album. So before the pandemic started, there's definitely, and like when it first started, there's definitely a bit of a feeling like, bummer, I can't play new music from these bands because they literally can't release it right now. But the cool thing is that there have been so many bands that have stayed creative and active throughout this whole thing. So I still have new music to be able to play, and there have even been brand new bands that have formed over the pandemic, which I don't know how they did it, but props to them. They did it. They got the music out. I've been able to play it. And of course, with Calgary going in and out of lockdowns, people have had a chance to kind of like get together to create new music. So I would say, well, at times there was a bit of a challenge finding new music. It hasn't been too hard because I can always fall back on older music as well. Or there's still several bands out there that maybe haven't put out music in the past 2 years that I haven't even played on my show yet. Like, there is well over 500 bands in Calgary, or whether they're current or an old band. I actually do have a bit of a list going, and yeah, over 500 bands. It's insane. So lots and lots of music to pick from.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I mentioned it on the lost recording, but it's cool that the bands that you mentioned, like your top three there when you did mention them, I've never heard of them before, and it's like for somebody who is digging through the local music scene to like have people on my show to not hear about bands who are so important to somebody else and maybe some of their favorites. It's cool. That's just like a cool experience in general, and is a testament to how big the scene is.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I get text messages when I'm doing my show because we have an option where you can text the booth, and people will be suggesting bands, and a lot of them I have heard before, but some of them I haven't heard before, which is really, really cool that while I'm, showcasing local music, people are coming to me with even more local music that I can just, quickly jot down the name and say, thank you so much. That's awesome. And then I have a new band to go check out.
Yeah, for sure. And again, just one thing that you touched on about bands that formed during lockdown, I just have to give a shout out to the band Exit Division.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they formed in February of last year and put out a full-length album at the end of last year called Psychosis, and it is phenomenal for barely being able to play live together. Like, it is so good.
It's really good. I actually did get a chance in my old band to play a show with them. I was in a band called Krill Williams for a hot sec, and we did a show back in February. And even seeing that band live, like, okay, their drummer is like 13 or 14. I'm not really sure. It's an all ages band. That kid is a way better drummer than I am, and I'm like 23. So being able to see this all-ages band full of kids that genuinely love music and are genuinely talented at it has been incredible. I've listened to that album so many times. I'm just so blown away by it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And just like knowing the age of that band and then hearing that album, you're just like, this... it doesn't fit, but like, holy crap, is it good?
I know. It's like, wait, you guys are like, I'm basically a kid too, but like you're children and you created something that is so good. I would never be able to tell that you're an all ages band. So yeah, Exit Division, I will always have an all ages band. I always have like a soft spot for, because I love it when kids and, younger people get into music and get really passionate about it. But yeah, Exit Division, they've done a lot of work. They've worked really hard and they're hustling online, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, they have. And it's just another cool thing that I found out after chatting to them is they actually met through the School of Rock music program.
Oh, cool.
Which is like another really cool thing that happens in Calgary that kind of like, actually it happens worldwide, but it's just a cool music initiative basically that encourages, it teaches young people how to be in a band, which is just, I think, so neat.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've known adults who don't know how to be in bands, so it's a good skill to learn in the music scene.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess if people did want to reach out to you and show you their music or anything like that, what would be the best way for people to do that?
So the platform that I'm most active on is Instagram. So my Instagram for my local singles account is just my show name, CJSW. So local singles, CJSW. And typically all they need to do is send me an Instagram message, and we typically will chat from there, whether sometimes it's up to the band's preference, whether they prefer to send a listening link or email me a file. But for people who do want to email me, I typically will direct them to localsinglesyyc@gmail.com. And yeah, it's really easy to get in contact with me that way. If people want to get in contact with me through other forums, they can also just Sami Parker. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I've had people connect with me that way as well. I'm very open to that. So really just look up my name on Facebook or Instagram. Maybe not Google, because my name is attached with another not so appropriate kind of figure out there. Yeah, I share a name with a porn star. It's great. So I'm not the porn star. I'm the radio host. So you can look out for that if you want to send music.
Cool. And yeah, all those links I'll have them in the episode notes as well, so that if people do want to connect with you, it should be easy for them to do so. Is there any kind of just final things that you would like to throw out there before we close this out?
I think we have talked so much today, especially with the lost recordings, but I do want to say a big thank you for having me on the show. I think this is the second or third podcast I've ever been on, and I'm always blown away when people ask me to be on their podcast, because I'm like, oh, little old me. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you like local music, I like local music, and we both talk about local music all the time. So I thought it would be an awesome conversation to have, and it was. So
yeah, makes for a good combination.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Sami. For those of you who would like to listen to local singles, again, you can find Sami on 90.9 CJSW every Wednesday between noon and 1 p.m. And I think you could probably also listen online, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. Just head to cjsw.com, and under programming, you should see a schedule. You can also listen back to any of the previous episodes that I have done. And of course, I also have a Spotify playlist with a bunch of local music on it. But we also have CJSW podcasts on Spotify as well.
Awesome. Cool. So there's lots of ways that you can listen.
Oh, yes. There's no excuse not to.
Yeah, no excuses. No excuses, everyone. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you like this episode of Groove Talk, why not leave a review? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Help us break through those evil algorithms and reach the most amount of glorious listeners that we possibly can. For up-to-date information on the show, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and you can find us at Froggy Style Productions. For more ways to support the show, visit fsproductions.ca.